Hi, and welcome to the Founder's Journey podcast, our third episode. So we're racking them up these days. Founder's Journey podcast is really really focused on providing actionable tips and personal insights around what it's like to lead a startup, start a startup, be a founder. I'm your co-host, Greg Moran. I've got my other co-host here, Peter Dean. Hi, Peter.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Are you ready for the big news yet? Or I'll wait. Go ahead.
I don't know if Peter says he's got some big news. I have no idea what is about to happen. But anyway, we are joined today as our guest by Lisa First-Willis. Lisa is the CEO of a company based in Baltimore called Truvelop. Full disclosure, I'm an investor in Truvelop. Actually, Peter is too. So I guess full disclosure, we're both investors in, and so is Lisa. So all of us on this call are investors in Truvelop. So there's the disclosure. But Lisa, happy to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we're glad you're here. So let's jump into it. Let's just start off. Tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about Truvelop.
Sure. So a little bit about me. So I am a career HR executive. I have over 25 years experience working in very large companies, global companies, and managing HR on the front lines. I've also worked for fast-growing tech startups. So I've really run the gamut and I've seen it all. And that's really been the piece that inspired me to go out and start my own company in the HR tech space. So having the background to do it, being the end user of technology, and oftentimes technology that didn't work or that didn't serve the purpose that it was intended to serve, or it really didn't make a difference. So that's really just kind of giving the background on how we ended up with Truvelop being started a couple years ago.
It's great. So what's Truvelop? I mean, we know what Truvelop is, but people listening probably don't know what Truvelop is.
Well, you know what Truvelop is, of course, but for all of those out there listening, Truvelop is a management coaching platform, and we sit specifically in the HR tech space. And what we do at the end of the day is help managers become better leaders. So we have really amazing technology running on the back end. We refer to it as our proprietary coaching engine, and we're using all of this data that we're collecting within the platform to deliver targeted recommendations to managers. And we're continuously pushing all of these insights that really, at the end of the day, enables managers to take the next step. And they quickly adopt proactive management behaviors. They're giving real-time feedback to their employees in the moment when it counts. And all of this has an impact on employee performance, on their engagement, and ultimately on retention, which is so important right now.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, as a manager or an owner of a company with people, like retention, it's scary because hiring is so hard right now and finding good people is so hard. I mean, the impact of that, it's got to be pretty big for an organization. Like what is, so how did you get into this? Like what drove you to this area of HR?
So when I think back to a time when I was managing talent management and talent development for this global manufacturer, we had 10,000 employees in the US, right? And it was post 9/11. It was a super challenging environment. And we had frontline workers. We were turning over, having major problems, right? And when you really take a step back and look at which facilities are performing the best, which facilities have the least amount of turnover, which locations do we have the highest levels of productivity, and our retention numbers are strong? Well, guess what? It all leads back to who the leaders are in that particular site or location. So for me, it's always been about the manager. And that impacts your employee experience. I mean, you can think about the times that you've worked for an organization and it was an amazing experience. Why? Because you had an amazing leader who was inspiring you, who was coaching you, who was guiding you to be the best that you could be. And
they were good listeners too. They got good feedback from it.
Exactly. And then you think about the worst jobs that you've ever had. I can think of them, and they're just resonate with you so much, because those were times where you had a manager who rarely spoke with you. They were a taskmaster. They didn't encourage you. If you missed a deadline, it was dropping the hammer, and it wasn't about, hey, I noticed that you're struggling right now. What's going on? How can I help? What can I do to get you back on track? What are your barriers or challenges? If nobody's having that conversation with you, that employee is set up for failure. And that was really that's the missing link, right? And you can have all these technology platforms, you can have all of this technology at your fingertips, but at the end of the day, if it's not guiding you to go do something or take action or go engage with your team, then it's worthless technology, in my opinion.
So I had a manager one time who used to, when he would get annoyed with people, used to say to them, well, if you were smart, what you would have done is, and then is that the kind of like management tip that Truvelop provides? Is that like good, solid management right there?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg.
Because I thought it was genius, but I was on the receiving end of it all the time. So
right, the most demotivate. We push demotivating insight.
Do you remember? Do you guys remember the old? There was like, you remember I don't even think they're around anymore. Remember that business accessories that used to like put up the, like you go and it'd be like, it'd be like the picture of the eagle. It'd be like soar with eagles or whatever. The like cliched saying. And then there was a company that was like, that did that. I can't remember the name of the company, but demotivational.
Demotivating.
Right. It'd be like, to be a picture of an eagle, it'd be like this eagle flew into a tree and died or whatever.
Not gonna happen.
Well, I'm glad
Instead
to
of
hear those
make it happen, it's not gonna happen.
That's right.
Right. Don't even try.
It's probably not gonna happen.
So just to be clear, we're kidding. This is not what Truvelop does. Truvelop doesn't provide. Right. But I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, this is a huge problem, right? When you look across, especially, having led a high growth company, I mean, this was something that we struggled with all the time, right? Because I think usually what would happen also all the time is we would promote people from an individual contributor role and stick them in a manager role. And I mean, these were fine people and capable people, and many of them went on to have incredible management careers, but we didn't train them. We just stuck them in and said, great, meet Peter. He now works for you. Have fun. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's a common structure, thing, right? It gives you the structure to work under that allows you to be a good manager, right? In many ways. I know I'm like I know I'm horrible, at this stuff. So anyhow.
Peter is a bad manager.
He would
awful. But I mean, is that kind of the common use case though that you see is, it's kind of people ending up in these roles that they're untrained. They don't know what they're necessarily getting themselves into. They don't know how to have a difficult conversation. Is that kind of the typical thing that you see?
We do see that quite often, right? So, or there's a span of control issue. So you might have, you have a team of 25 people just because of the nature of the work today. Everyone's trying to do more with less. Or they're being promoted into roles that they haven't been provided any sort of management or supervisory training. Now, it's important to note we're not an LMS. We're not saying, oh, you're a new manager, go read these 25 books.
What's an LMS? Just
a learning management system.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Where we're just, it's a library of resources. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that it just gives you a good example. So imagine if you have a new team member on your team, right? And they're starting, and you're not quite sure how to onboard them effectively. And because they're new, imagine if the technology would push notify that manager and say, hey, you have a new team member on your team. Remember, this is the most difficult time during the first 30, 60 days. Make sure we're acclimating this team member to the role and doing it well to ensure success. But then we don't stop there, right? Then we push additional information to that manager and say, here's a couple things you can do to really make sure this is an engaging experience for your team member and set them up for success. And that could be conversation starters. It can be quick hit videos. It's giving them all of these resources so that using your mobile device, you're literally scrolling through different ways that you can best engage with this team member once you know a little bit about them. So if someone is struggling, if they're underperforming, there's manager actions that you can take to get that team member back on the right track. We're pushing those very simple insights to that manager that say things like, check in with your team member, ask them how they're doing and what problems they're experiencing, what's standing in their way. Meet with this team member regularly. Frequent check-ins for 2 or 3 minutes make all the difference. So it's making this entire manager and employee relationship actionable, meaningful, and we're driving more meaningful touch points between that manager and employee as a result. And it's all by making this very simple, making the manager more productive. We're not giving them something else to do other than go have this meaningful touch point with your team member that improves their overall employee experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like one of the oldest business axioms out there, right? People don't quit jobs, they quit managers.
Of course.
And I think if you can solve that problem, right, in any company, whether you're a small startup or, a small business or a large organization, I think if you can solve that problem, that's, that can make a pretty big difference. So Truvelop is where that's your mission today. That's what you're out doing. You had a great HR career. What on earth made you join us in the completely chaotic
founder side
of stuff? Like what, I guess my question is like, what were you thinking would be
back to the founder's journey? Like, how did you get here?
That's right.
How did you go from being an employee to having employees?
Yep. Within your own company.
Yeah.
Right.
As an owner, as a founder.
So it's one of those things where when I think about 5 years ago, when I made this transition and said, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to build this product. The gap exists today, and I think I can build this product. I was very fortunate right before starting my HR consulting business that I was part of an ad tech startup in Baltimore that was pre-IPO. I was the VP of HR and helped grow this company from 25 employees to 500 globally, right? We had a successful IPO. There was something very inspiring about the startup ecosystem and the environment that provided, where people were working in ways that, really challenged them, really stretched them. You had the chance to meet all of these amazing people, very smart people along the way. And once you get that bug and that itch for the startup and the startup mentality, it really grows with you. And it's something that it's almost like a disease, Peter. I know you and I have talked about this before, where it's like, once you catch this bug, you can't shake it. And everything comes back to wanting to build technology and build a solution that impacts people's lives. So that was something that I think, had I not had that experience, I would have never taken this on.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting because you made the point about the people at the startup are different, and people that go there, they seek out an opportunity like this where they can challenge themselves and be a part of an organization that's trying to make a big difference, as opposed to, and I'm not rubbing a big company, but it's just not a place that I've been there, but I don't necessarily belong there because I want to move and change faster than they have the capability to, right? They have to move slower and more deliberate. And we don't do that in the startup world. So it sounds like you worked with those types of people, and that was a big, a big impact in your thought about being, leading a group of that, a team like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the time when I made the transition, I could not have been happier. I had a successful HR consulting business. I was living large. Everything was great, right? And I said to my husband, I think I can do this. I think I need to do this, because what if I don't? What if I don't do it?
Yep.
And what is that going to mean at the end of the day, right? I could have the most successful HR consulting business in the world, but if it's not making a difference in people's lives, then why do it?
Yeah.
The big challenge for me at the time was we were putting 3 kids in college at the same time. We still had our youngest at home. And it was one of those questions like, okay, if we're going to do this, like, we got to go all in. And within the first year of having one income, we sold the big house, right? We sold everything we had, downsized. 3 kids are great in college, and just went all in and said, we're going to do whatever we need to and do whatever it takes to survive. The big, amazing thing to me is that I'm still married to my husband, and he has left me out on the street.
Well, you can join the club.
Add her husband.
Yeah,
our wives. We have that meeting that, like, we could have this podcast where we ask them what it was like, because because the founder journey is not easy. Like, you take big. Like, I've been with zero money in the bank with a family, I'm wondering, okay, what do we do next? Right. And then I tell my wife, oh, I'm starting another company. She's like, really? That's what we're doing? Is that a good idea? It's the best idea I have.
I think it's the only idea I have. I'm
right.
I got nothing else.
I can't work for anyone else. Is that gonna happen?
I love that question though, right? That what if I don't do this? Because
that's a great question.
I think it's something that, it's so easy, I think, for people to get sort of hung up in the opposite side of that, right? Of, well, what if I do this? I mean, how do I going to afford the house?
Right.
How am I going to make the college tuition? How am I going to, do all these things? And, but when you reframe that question, the downside is often not nearly what we think it is. Right. And, it's I think that's just a really, really powerful way to look at it. So Lisa, it's been 5 years. You migrated into the software business from the HR consulting side of it. What are the big lessons learned at this point? Like, what has that experience been like? Right. And because there's good, there's bad. And, what are the lessons that you feel like, hey, I've learned this about myself, or I've learned that about myself, or the business, in general?
So I guess 2 parts. So I'll take the personal things first. I've definitely learned to be resilient, and I've definitely learned to not be so hard on myself. Although I found myself in a situation 2 weeks ago where I completely failed. Right? It was terrible. I completely failed, let my team down, and which was devastating to me. And it took me a good couple of days to get back out of bed and be like, all right, enough is enough. Stop feeling sorry for yourself and turn it around. And you got this, and give yourself a little bit of credit. You build an HR tech solution that people are using, that managers can't live without, that is incredibly inspiring to employees. So yeah, you had this terrible epic fail, but don't forget what you have accomplished. And that's been a big learning experience for me. This is a very lonely, the founder's journey is a very lonely, isolating one. It's oftentimes a thankless job. So being able to self-motivate and self-course correct and just keep yourself going, that's a lot of the lessons learned personally, right?
Totally.
It's so true. I mean, the fact that you've got yourself back up, that's the most important thing. But the fact that you are that critical of yourself is probably part of why you're successful today, because you hold the bar really high. But as we've learned over the years, like doing this and making huge fails, like I've made way bigger failures than that, let me tell you. Whatever it was, I'm sure.
I know what it was.
What I've found,
and Peter, I can tell you've had much bigger fails.
Way bigger. And I've found that failure is not fatal. Failure is not fatal, but success is not a finish line. It's like, it's continuous, right? And so it's like, once it sounds like you realize that, and you're like, then you go through that, then the next one comes, and you're just like, that was as bad as that. Like, that wasn't that bad. Like,
right.
You're like, how bad can it get?
Lisa and I were
bring it on.
when this incident happened, which incidentally Lisa thinks was a big deal in the scheme of things. That it will be a minor funny story, and over the long term in the life of the business, for sure, right? We all have those, but Lisa and I were joking about all of the times, right, that as a founder you think there's this outside perception of, oh, they're CEO of their tech company and this and that, and just the random insane stuff that you kind of find your way into. I was telling Lisa the story about, I was pitching Hard Rock Cafe. It was like one of the biggest deals we'd ever gone after, and I made the comment to Peter, you probably remember the story. I made the comment to all of our sales reps that I could sell better than they could, so I was going to go do the pitch. And I went down to Orlando, and I got to the corporate headquarters for Hard Rock, and there were like 25 people in the room, and I couldn't even log into our software. Like, I literally couldn't log in.
I remember hearing this story.
I mean, just the ridiculous things you find yourself in, right? It's like it's but that is part of that is just such a huge part of that journey,
Yeah. Just be careful about saying you can sell better than a salesperson.
Yeah, it turns out I couldn't. And I couldn't even log in. I think the point you made, Lisa, about I think the CEO, the founder, it truly is one of the loneliest jobs out there, right? And I think especially in some of the times that we've been going through, where you're sort of, your life is, everybody, right? Any founder, like your life kind of goes from one really hard decision to the next, to the next, to the next. Like, I used to joke with a mutual friend of me and Peter all the time, like my entire life had become one giant awkward conversation. Like, I didn't have any conversations that weren't awkward. Right. But that's that loneliness, right? That's that, like, I don't think anybody understands like what the day is like, and it really is. It really is, the resiliency, I think, is a really important thing.
That's absolutely true. I think that's one of the biggest things that you need to take a self-check on if you're thinking about doing this. Like, you just get ready to pick yourself up off the floor, and you have to do it yourself a lot. I mean, you obviously use friends and people that you trust that you could share this journey with as another founder. And I've always had Greg to share that with, which is, I've been lucky to. And that's some advice that people just find other founders, because they're the only ones that know how it feels, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So the resiliency side on the personal side is one of the big kind of self-discoveries that you made, and I think it's an incredibly powerful one. On the business side, what would you tell, like, a new founder coming up, like, hey, I did this, it didn't work. I did this, it worked really well. Like, what are those kind of business lessons you think you've learned?
So I would say that when building the product, not being so fast to put something out in the market until you have vetted it with end users, right? That's an important part of this process, and one that we did from day one, which was, putting this concept in front of a lot of different people and continuously getting feedback from the customer and the end user. Even today, the product's really been in the market for 2 years, right? But in the last 2 years, any enhancements that we have made in the product have been based on end user feedback.
Mhm.
So a good example of this during COVID, when it first started and everything went into lockdown, I had no idea what was going to happen. That's when we really launched our product, right? And which the timing could not have been worse, but at the same time, we had really great customers and we had to keep going. And we pulled all the customers together, all of our HR leaders at these various customers, and said, listen, nobody knows how long this is going to last. We're not quite sure. What do we need in this app that's going to help keep managers and employees connected during this incredibly challenging, nobody knows what's going to happen next time, where everyone is just freaking out, right? And they said, listen, there's very specific things we need. One of them is a place to publicly praise and recognize members and keep the celebrations going, just to keep people connected. Because, remember, now everybody's in lockdown and you're trying to do your job remote. How do you bring that human element back into the manager-employee relationship and keep checking in on people? How are they doing? Are they, how's their well-being mentally, physically? All of it came into play. And that's part of the reason why our customers are with us 2-3 years later, is that we've built a community and we really lean on one another. So being able to listen to what the end user has to say and pay attention to their needs, that's, I think, a key to a successful product.
Yep. I think it's a great point. I mean, there's, it's really easy to kind of, we see products all the time, and as a venture firm, you get kind of exposed to a lot that's out there, right? And, we see products all the time where, somebody kind of goes into the closet and starts coding away and, comes out with something that is interesting and not sellable, right? I think it's a really common mistake. And Peter has this great saying of like, build what somebody's going to buy, right?
Do what people are willing to pay you for.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was,
yeah.
And, but I think it's super obvious, but unbelievable how many times it's overlooked.
And I think what it's easy to say you're doing that as a company, but it's not easy. Like a lot of companies say we're listening, but to actually do it is another thing. And it's hard to take that step and do it. But I think that's the big thing that Lisa I've seen her do, is just actually do it, not just say, hey, we want feedback, but actually go actively get it, and listen, actually take it on board. Because it's hard to listen when you're thinking, hey, we're going to do this, and then someone else is like, I like this. It's hard to change or let a customer guide you, or your customers guide you.
So if you were to go back in time, right, and back to the early days of Truvelop, or at any point during that journey, what'd you change? What would you say to somebody? Hey, I did this, and this is the thing I'd change it if I could.
I think really thinking about that's a great question, Greg. I haven't really thought about, what would I really change about the way we approached it? I would have brought on marketing support a lot sooner, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of our time now is being spent on product positioning and product marketing, and making sure that we're telling the right story that resonates with the end user, with the buyer. It's such an important part of it. And that has always been a gap that we've had. We've had, amazing technologists, right? Amazing product build people. Obviously, my background in HR, critical to this, right? Because I'm a buyer of technology, so that's good. Check that box. Sales, we've had that sales support and sales expertise. But really, the marketing one, which is the most expensive when you think about it, outside of product, it's very expensive, but boy, it's a must-have. And that's what I would say, having that product marketing resource from the beginning. Boy, it would have saved so much of the time that we're investing now had we had that all along.
Yeah, it's and Truvelop is hardly alone in that, right? I think, I mean, it's funny because sometimes there's my partner in the venture fund, Ira, who you guys both know well. I mean, he and I have this debate all the time, like it's like chicken or the egg, right? Which comes first? Does product positioning come first? Does does positioning come first? Does product build come first? And I was wrong in his take, which is product. So I'll just state that. So when he listens to this, he knows publicly I said he doesn't know what he's talking about. But positioning, to me, I mean, that because it can dictate so many of the product roadmap decisions that we make, as we go down the road.
I think, Greg, you just ruined my big news. Like, my big announcement was that we had 300% growth in followers to the Founders Journey. And now you just got rid of one of them. So now we only have 2 listeners, your mom and my mom. And so now, like, Ira's gone, we have 200% growth. That's like founders math, right?
What will be, that's right, exactly. What will be the biggest
from 0 to 2?
The biggest episode that we have is when we actually do get our spouses, and we need to include Lisa's husband in this.
Yes, that would be wonderful
to come on and talk about what this journey looks like actually from the spouse side of it, which will
that one we'll have to have some drinks before we start it, and then start it.
I think the way we need to do that is probably the 3 of us need to go drinking and just let them do it. And we can
just let them do it and say, okay, what is it? Just totally give it to them.
Well, it's and I'm going back to that point because as we kind of start to wrap up our time here, I'm going back to that point because I think it's there's been a lot that we've talked about today, and the power of resiliency, and to really combat the loneliness of being a founder, and reframing that question, right? I just love it. I wrote this down. I'm going to write it down wherever I can, which, what if I don't do this, right? As just
it's amazing,
enormously powerful question, but also the impact that, the support and the positive impact that a spouse has in this. If you're married, or if you have a partner, or whatever that is, right? That personal support that comes into this, because at the end of the day, this is a deeply, deeply personal journey. We talk about as the founder's journey, but it's very much a human journey, right? That that you go through in this.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's the stuff that I think really helps people thinking about doing this, because that's what they're afraid of most, probably. Mm-hmm. The business stuff sometimes isn't it you're afraid of as much as the other stuff that you're afraid of, and knowing that you can get through it, and you can get small. Like, I've gotten really small before, and we're still a family. That hasn't changed. How we interact as people doesn't change. I still have the same friends that support me. That doesn't change, right? But that launches you into, the potential for what you really want to do. And the exhaust of that is the financial outcomes later on, right? It's not necessarily because of that, but that's cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really, really pretty brave of you. So I appreciate it.
So that's it. This is, we successfully convinced Lisa to join us on the podcast, which she didn't say this out loud, but I know she was a little bit reluctant to do. So hopefully it wasn't too painful, but I can say, Lisa, this absolutely 100%. I know I'm speaking for Peter, the best episode we've ever done, because
Absolutely.
we've had 3. I interviewed Peter, he interviewed me. This crushed what we've.
She probably has a better family than ours that will actually listen. So we could have like 500% growth in our following by the next podcast.
That's
And
right.
again, that's founder's math. That's just like saying, to a VC, oh yeah, we're just south of $1 million ARR. Well, how much ARR do you have? Like 20K. It's south of $1 million, right?
It's a true statement. Well, thanks, Lisa. This is awesome. Where, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Truvelop,
Yep.
how do they do it?
Truvelop.com. I can always, yep.
Just spell that if you could.
Sure. TRUVELOP, Truvelop.com. And we're obviously also on LinkedIn and soon to be on Twitter as well.
All right.
Thank you.
And you're just Lisa at Truvelop, right?
I am.
If somebody wants to contact you directly. All right. Well, this is great, Lisa. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. We'll see everybody on the next edition of the Founder's Journey.
Thank you.